Most people think being the first researcher or the first designer on a team means that you finally get to do it all your way. But the reality hits fast. You're not just collecting insights or designing wireframes, you're building the pipes, you're selling the value, you're negotiating the budget, you're managing up, and somehow keeping everybody aligned. All while trying not to become the bottleneck yourself. It's less do the work yourself and more create a culture from scratch. So if you've ever wondered what it really takes to build a design or research practice when you're the only one in the room, stick around because this episode is going to change the way you think about your job. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome. I am super stoked to have you. How often do you stare at a blank Figma canvas unsure where to start? This episode is brought to you by Mobbin, the ultimate UI and UX design inspiration library. Mobbin gives you instant access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI and user flows from apps you love, and content is added weekly so you never have to start from scratch again. Quickly find exactly what you need, search by app category, UI patterns, or even specific features. And my team and I use Mobbin daily at work to find useful patterns, and it helps my team work much more efficiently. And honestly, I can't imagine kicking off a new feature without Mobbin. So you ready to level up your design process? Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and never run out of inspiration again. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are a regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, and Zoe for all their support. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing here, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. So if you've ever been thinking about getting a job as the only designer or founding designer, or maybe you just ended up in a job without really understanding what that job is and you're there today, you're feeling stuck, what you probably realized is that the craft, the hard skills is one tiny fraction of that work. And if you are not working to build consensus or find other people, bring them along for the journey, you are going to be struggling and you probably need some help. So I am so excited to have my good buddy, Julian Della Mattia, on the show today. And we are going to talk all about being he's a researcher, so the first researcher, but I think these same ideas apply across the board. So I'm so excited to have Julian on the show. Julian has spent his entire career stepping into one of the toughest roles in UX, being one of the first researchers inside an organization. And over the years, he's mastered the craft of building research practices from the ground up, helping teams move beyond ad hoc insights and towards scalable, meaningful learning. He specializes in everything early researchers need to make research stick, earning stakeholder buy-in, proving the value of user insights, delivering high-quality research that actually drives decisions, and building the infrastructure organizations rely on to understand their users, their problems, and their market. Julian's also the host of Finders to Builders, a podcast for first and solo researchers navigating the unique challenges of establishing a research practice from scratch. And Julian, we are going to have you on the show today on the other side of the mic. Well, you have a mic too. I guess it's not really other side of the mic. You are on the receiving end of the questions today. And I am so excited to have you on. So I know I read your bio a little bit, dude, but welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about you. And ultimately, man, how did you get to realize how navigating that solo gig is a lot different from being on a large team?
Well, first of all, thank you, Jeremy, for having me. Love to be here. Been a fan of the show for quite some time now, and happy to be on the other side of the mic, or the other mic, right? It's
the other mic, yeah.
The receiving end of. So happy to be here. The fact that when I started taking research roles, I started and I was, research was kind of becoming something at the time, especially in smaller companies or small and medium-sized companies and in mature product organizations and so on. I got into that, and I noticed that I didn't have everything I had in other contexts. So what I mean here is I started working, I actually started as a PM, actually. That was my first role in tech. But then my first steps in research were at an agency. And there was a lot of infrastructure there that enabled me. You also have more senior researchers. There was some folks taking care of some stuff for us. We had a different set of tools. And it was the engine, worked and things moved forward rather quickly. And when I took my first role as the first researcher in this company, I noticed there was nothing. I reached out. It's oh, where are my things? Where are my tools? And why are people thinking this way, why I'm being questioned like this. I usually like, well, here I am. I'm here to do the work. Here you go, Mr., Mrs. There's a stuff, and off we go, and up to the next challenge. And when I got this first in-house role, I started noticing that I need to build something else. And this scenario started like happening sometimes. I mean, first time was by chance. The second time, we can still call it chance, but the third time it happens, it's not by chance anymore. There's something like there's something I'm like unconsciously choosing here. It's like, well, I like this context in which I get to set up everything from scratch. Also connects to my experience, right? At some point, it's like, well, I did that before, I could do it again. So that's been my kind of like my story with research. And then at some point I created my own agency where I would act as a surrogate research in some companies. I would go and then I would build a practice, and after some months I will have a researcher hired. And I started like building around about around building practices. It sounds like a bit meta, right? But that's how I got here. And well, now I'm back in house. I'm currently working at DuckDuckGo just because I wanted to move away from that for a bit. I wanted to like have a different challenge. But I'm still super passionate about building, the pipes and the infrastructure, and building how the engine the engine itself and how it should work, right?
I love that. I love building a practice around building the practice. If that wasn't on your consulting company's website, go back and add that now. I feel like that's brilliant. No, but that's interesting because, when a lot of people, like, again, I've heard so many people talk about, like, I used to do a lot of career coaching, especially junior designers, people shifting in. And I would hear this advice that people would give sometimes, like, oh, you should start at a small agency and kind of just like learn how fast everything moves and all that stuff. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, somebody who has never had a job before in design or research gets a job at this small agency where nobody else, like maybe you're the only designer there. What do you do? How do you do the job? Like, how do you do all the stuff beyond the actual work that gets you, to be your team to be, running efficiently? And I've always thought that was like really bizarre. Like, I think it's great to do at some point, but like for early career people, especially because like you said, there's so much other stuff that you would have no idea. You could read all the books, you could watch the YouTube videos, you could take 1,000 classes, but till you start like doing the work and realizing that this is way different than what I expected, and it's not necessarily what I learned in school, and there's all the other things that I have to do to teach these other people, how to build the practice beyond just the practice itself. You're going to struggle in your career. So like, I'm curious, like you started off in your career though, working in a large agency with other people, or did you start your career at small agencies, kind of working on tinier teams or just yourself? How did you start your career?
No, I think that would have been the ultimate challenge, like being the first researcher in an agency it would be like building a practice and then build practices. That would also be like something like meta. But no, in my case, the agency was already running. It was more like, it was an agency slash group of small agencies, kind of like a collective. This was actually in Berlin, Germany. And these people that were like especially senior researchers and service designers around me. And I learned a lot from them. So I kind of like layered my learning. So at the beginning, when I moved from product management to research, I had a lot of PM mindset still. It's like I was like, my books were, Steve Blank, these kind of things. I get out of the building, it's like customer development, So these kind of things is not necessarily what you would call like traditional research or service design or user-centered design. I started to learn that as I transitioned. But of course, there were folks doing it like for years, and I tried to learn from them. So I learned the research first, but I still had this system kind of mentality. I mean, I noticed right away that there were things that needed to happen in order for me to conduct the research. So that's how I learned about it. But like to your point, and I think you made something really interesting remark there. Like there are a lot of folks who just like are advising, just go into an agency and like find your way. I would kind of like take that with a pinch of salt. There's one thing about agencies that you get a lot of exposure to different contexts and different products and different clients and different stakeholders. That's like a mini master's degree in how to like deal with different stuff. That's great, but do it in an agency where research or design practice is already somehow mature, especially if you're starting out. If you're a junior designer or junior researcher and you're the only one and the first one, this is your first gig, it's basically just signing up for like, driving full speed against the wall. Like, it's good to learn from other folks. It's good to be exposed to like different settings. So if the agency is mature, go for it. Super, super recommended. If it's not mature, like be careful there.
So I think it's a good way to like kick this conversation off too, is a sort of level set. Like the people that we are speaking to today, I don't think are the junior researchers, junior designers, people just starting out. I would advise like learn from other people. I always use the analogy of like learning to do a backflip, you know, like you want to learn how to be a gymnast, you want to learn how to do a backflip. You could watch a bunch of YouTube videos and go out in your backyard and try to do a backflip, land on your head, break your neck, you're dead. Or you could go to a gym and learn from other people who have done it before and teach you how to do a backflip safely so you don't break your neck when you do your backflip. And so I think this is sort of the same thing applies. Like, you know, in our case, we're talking today about the people who are going to go off and do that work, who have mastered their craft. They understand how to do it, whether you're a designer, researcher, you know how to do the work really well. But now we got to figure out how to get everybody else on board so that we can all work efficiently and actually create great software together. And so I think that's like a really great way to like sort of kick this conversation off. We're not talking, I don't think, to junior folks. Now, you know, that said, you want to try it. You know, people like my kids, you know, I got to tell them like not to touch the hot pan 1,000 times, but they're going to go touch the hot pan. Not to equate, you know, junior designers with children, obviously, but you know, you got to at some point let people figure stuff out the hard way on their own. So anyway, a little preface for this conversation today. I'm curious, man, when did you first go out on your own then and become that sort of founding designer or solo designer within a larger organization? And what was that experience like coming from a place where it had a more mature practice like your agency going? What was some like things that you saw and some things that you observed? And ultimately, you know, like what was that process like for you, sort of like getting up and running as the solo researcher or founding researcher at a new org?
You know, funny enough, when I was doing the switch, at the time there were not many researcher jobs. So, you know, you would look for UX on LinkedIn or Glassdoor and you would see like, oh, there's one thing here. And if you found 3 ads, 2 of them were designers and the other one was actually like UX, UI, all the
all the acronyms, yeah.
all the letters that you can add there, all these kind of, and researchers were kind of like really hard to come across. Researcher roles were not that common at the time. So in fact, I was interviewing for a PM role. As I said at the beginning, I started off as a PM. I got into this interview. I wanted to go back to like, I wanted to leave the agency work for a business. Like I need to be in-house. I need to do something different. And I actually interviewed for PM roles. I was interviewing for design roles, but I was like, my design skills suck. To this day, still, I cannot design even if my life depended on it. I will just like move stuff on Figma and that's it. But I was like applying like for any design role, but also PM role, or like because of my background. And in one of those conversations, like the kind of PM they were looking for was very oriented to what we call a researcher. It's like basically a researcher who also like took care of the backlog. And at some point in that conversation, with that company, it's like, I think you're looking for a researcher. And that's how my role became the product researcher. And I started like, basically the job description was like, talk to customers, do this, do that. It's like, it was very research oriented. So that's how I kind of like landed that role by accident. And when I got there, I noticed like, great, I need to do all this, but do we know how to reach out to customers like in a scalable way that is not just like running around the office and asking people, hey, do you know someone you can introduce me to? And maybe you can have 1 hour with them and offer them whatever, swag or something. It's like, that's not scalable, right? Or every time I found something out, I wanted to share it with the team, but then I wanted to have a place for them to go and revisit that stuff. So at some point I noticed that there was a lot of things I needed to build. I mean, at that time, and I think this is also part of I don't know if I explored this topic before, but it's great that we talked about the origin story. I was not that good at research because I have a different mindset. So how can I say? It was not my forte, so to put it in a way. I learned a lot from service designers and a lot from senior researchers, but I didn't feel as confident in research when I was starting out, but I did feel confident in setting up stuff or like thinking in a systems way, right? It's like, yeah, there are like, my head always went like the big picture and like what needs to, later in time, like I know this is called ops, you know, it becomes research ops, design ops, product ops, but I had that from the start, probably like kind of like something I brought from my PM role or something. I know my mind works like that, but I noticed that right away. So I focus on everything that needed to happen. It kind of like happen naturally at some point. It's like out of need, and then out of like, I like this, and this is what I feel like I'm good at. And it needs to happen. Even if I suck at interviewing, we still need to get users there, right? We still need to do something with the stuff that we do. Even if I'm not the best researcher or the best one, that's how I felt at the time. I still feel I'm more like an ops guy than a researcher, though. Deep inside, like sometimes I like, oh, these guys interviewing are so good, so much better than me, and then happened often in my career.
You got a little imposter syndrome. That's all right. I think you're great personally. So I want to talk a little bit about this mindset shift from finder to builder. You've got a whole show where you talk about this. The people that are going and finding the insights. That's one aspect of the job. But to be a really successful solo designer or founding designer, you actually have to be the one building the systems and laying the foundation for the rest of the team to actually do the work, which requires a lot of times very different skill set from the people who have mastered their craft to the people who are doing that ops and understanding how to build the system. So I want to talk a little bit about that mindset shift. I don't know if you have any thoughts, but maybe we could even talk about that whole first before we kick that off. What does finder to builder idea actually mean to you? When you think about that, what does that mean?
Okay, this is very applied to researchers, but I think some design folks can relate. I'm gonna try and also use as many UX generic examples as we can, because I think in the end, designers and researchers are like brothers, and we have like we grew we have slightly different mindsets and slightly different skill sets, but I think we're very much alike in how we think and how we approach stuff. But the finders to builders thing came because as researchers, when we go into a company, or when we approach a project, we get into this finder mentality, right? It's like, you join a company, I'm the researcher now, I would bring you the insights, like like a hound. I'll just go and look for stuff, and I'm gonna find stuff out for you, and great. But that's in one direction, right? But if you want research to actually succeed, you need to kind of like have a broader surface of impact, because otherwise it's just like, especially if you're alone, you just can't go and dig deep into this and then come back. It's like you need to build something that's scalable and where you can replicate and multiply your impact. It's not just about having more researchers only, but it's also about, especially when you are limited with resources, like how can you replicate the presence or the knowledge a researcher brings to the table in a way that everybody can process and can leverage to make better decisions, right? So that's pretty much the idea. So instead of becoming just a finder, the person who's just like, well, just go. And it's, totally fair if that's what you like and that's what you do, like totally respect that. But it's not just like the one bringing the insights, but also the one saying, well, my role is not just to find stuff out. My role is to help the whole company make better decisions based on data, based on insights. So how can I enable the organization or how can I help the organization to learn more and better? Because the more we know, the better decisions we'll make, and the better our products, the better our services are in the end, right? So when you think of this switch, it's like, well, I can allocate some time to research, right? To find out stuff. But then 75% or 70% of real should be about like the rest, right? Talking to other people, like managing expectations, also saying like, well, what parts of research can I rely on designers, on PMs to get, right? It's not only you. It's like everybody should be doing that. There's this, I think it was the UK government at some point used something like research is a team sport or something like that. I think it's a team sport that should be led by a researcher. That's the one addition that I make. But in the end, it's all like, if we all together as an organization start incorporating this into our mindset and into our operations, the better off we are. But the researchers are the one enabling that, right? It's like, it's same with design. It's like, yeah, you can go and you can be great at your craft and you can be the best designer, but then in the end, it's like, there's so many things that need to happen. It's like, are you in sync with development? Are you in sync with product? Are you creating components that can be like, that are scalable later on? Do you have a design system? Do you have like all these things in the end? It's like kind of the same idea, right? It's like you need to, a good analogy that could work here is, imagine you're really good at cooking at home. That's great. You're great. Like cooking, you're top notch. But running a restaurant, it's a different thing, right? You need to well, you have to make shifts, and you need to buy materials, and you need to take care of the customers, and you need to. It's very different. The craft and the whole service is a whole different ball game, right?
I love that, man. So, it's interesting because here's something that I want to kind of dig into a little bit is when you mentioned this, thinking about like the percentage of time that you take and you focus on certain things. This sort of begs the question because when, a lot of times, like I've heard a lot of people that will, get a job as a solo designer or researcher or whatever, and they'll be like, I'm just trying to keep my head down. I'm trying to do my work and I have to do blah, blah, blah. And I got all these meetings and I never have time to do my actual work. There's a trade-off there. There's an opportunity cost, right? Every minute that you're spending heads down doing the work is a minute that you're not building alliances with people who you're going to need their backing for a decision you're going to make in the future or working across the teams and stuff like that. So I'm curious, like how does someone decide what not to do with their limited time? Because that's a really interesting point. It's like you could do 1,000 things, but how do you narrow down the things that you just know are probably not going to help you in your role?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I reckon that this happens to a lot of people in different roles. But I would say that probably focus on what you can impact the most and what you can later on leverage. I think there are two. I like thinking about this in 2 dimensions. So there's some stuff that if you allocate a little bit of time, but you're constant with it, in the end, you're just building something that is larger, but just building the foundation slowly. And I think that's somewhere that you definitely should allocate time to. Sometimes I just as you said, I just put my head down and I focus on the work. But sometimes okay, what will I need 6 months down the road that I can start? It's this little habit. So I would say there's a 10% there's stuff that's maybe forward looking or future looking. I need to build a design system, for example, in the case of a designer, or I don't know, component library. I'm just I'm playing by ear here. I'm not a designer, but this kind of things. Well, allocate some time there because in the end you will benefit from that, but the whole organization will benefit from it down the road. And then what's the best use of your time? What's the most impactful thing you can work on, or the set of things you can work on for now? So for the immediate situation and for the next immediate one, right? And that's also how you start kind of triaging the things that you pick or not. And going back to this builder thing, I also like to use this playmaker analogy, right? It's at some point you need to change your mentality to also becoming a playmaker. So instead of just scoring the points or scoring the goals, or you need to build the plays, right? So you enable others to do some stuff. You enable others to score, and enable others to do their thing, right? Or do things from on their side. And these 2 things are closely related because at some point it's you probably have if you're doing things right and you're creating that appetite for research in an organization, you're probably your plate will start to fill really quickly. So wow, everybody's learning that research is effective and it's useful, and now everybody wants a piece of it, and everybody wants a bit of your time, and someone's well, I can't deliver everything, especially if I'm just a finder, right? So how can I start thinking this in a different way? So how can designers help me with something? How can PMs help with something? How can we create a synergy here? So for example, I don't know, you're getting a lot of requests to test the usability of X, Y, and Z. Okay, is that something that I need to undertake as a researcher? Or do I have other projects on my plate or other projects coming up that maybe have a larger impact or a different type of impact? So then you start prioritizing. And when you prioritize, you obviously, of course, you pick the big stuff, right? It's the CPO wants me to help him or help her with the strategy. It's that's pretty impactful. That sounds pretty important. So I'm just I need to pick this kind of projects up. And then all the other things you need to drop. But if you drop them, you go back to are people making the right decisions based on data? Do they know enough about the situation? Yes, no, probably not. So who's doing those usability testing? Can anybody do them? Can I help them learn how to do them properly? Designers know how to do that, but just expanding the circle a little bit. How can you start planting the seeds and building the muscle for those types of research, or having customer conversations? How to learn how to interview loosely, because sometimes you get a request and actually people just wanted to talk to someone, right? They just wanted access to users, and so that's also part of the game here, right? You prioritize. So you have a lot of things on your plate, they will start landing. So focus on what you can impact the most, and then a part of your time is how can I enable others?
Yeah, because this is something, and then one of the reasons why I think, a solo or founding designer, researcher is not the job of a junior is you've got to think long term. You got to be more strategic, and you have to plan the things that you're going to do. You can't just go from task to task to task and put out fire, put out fire, put out fires. If you are taking, because a lot of times when you're the only designer, you're the only researcher, everyone's coming to you on top of all the other stuff you have to do, right? You can't delegate because there's nobody else to delegate to. And so if you're not being strategic about the things that you're planning to do and guarding your time and saying no, right? You are going to just struggle and you're going to just go from task to task, feel like you've been busy, but you haven't gotten anything done. You've never gotten anything done. And so really being strategic, I think this is like really important to think about and planning your activities and everything else, which kind of leads me to the next question is, as the first designer, sole designer, researcher, founding, whatever, what are the things that are invisible that you might not have ever realized you even had to do? Right? Because we could be strategic and think about the things we need to do, but if we don't know what those things are, you can't plan for them. So what are the things that someone might not even expect one of like the first designer, first researcher to even have to do, but you have observed is absolutely critical to success?
That's a really good one. And it connects perfectly to the last bit of the last topic, right? I learned all that the hard way, right? It's like sometimes you just like overestimate some stuff and underestimate others. And then somebody's like, whoa, the first time I was the first researcher, I had a very different approach than the third or the fourth. Like the second time was different than the third time is like completely different and also matured as a researcher. So when you are the first one and you are the junior, which can happen, you need to tread carefully there, right? And there, going to your point, is like the question is, okay, how can I help, or how can I, what needs to happen in the organization for us to learn more and better? And then how do people perceive and what do people perceive of the work that I do, of the output they get from me, and what do they need? How do they consume it? And you need to basically, part of the things people miss right away is like understanding. We spend a lot of time understanding our users, understanding, the end user and the customers, and which is great. Of course, you should always do that, by the way. But we don't spend enough time researching or understanding our surroundings. And that's a lot of work. Understanding our work and building bridges. So those are two things. It's not only understanding, but also like, okay, how can we create the right dynamics between us? So that there are different layers there, right? And this affects how you communicate, how you deliver your stuff, who you deliver it to, how you present stuff, what level of information do they need or not, and what do they expect, and what kind of questions or what kind of things are keeping these people awake at night, right? It's like, what's the CPO, she's awake, like she's struggling to sleep because she's worried about, like, I don't know, churn. Understanding all these things is something that you won't expect right away, because you will say, well, we'll get a request and someone already has an idea of where we want to take this. But at some point, like, there's so many layers to it. It's just not the output itself, but also how it connects. Because in the end, it's all about humans, right? We are just like a bunch of flesh bobs trying to get something done, And,
It's true. Certainly true.
Like, get together and align, and you need to orchestrate different interests and different mindsets. So understanding that is crucial and is sometimes like completely overlooked.
Yeah, I love that. Well, that leads me to the next section that I want to dig into, which is more about, managing up and buy-in and influence and all that stuff. And I think that's something really interesting. And what's fascinating about this topic is that, being the only designer, researcher, whatever on a team implies that there are no others. It's just you, which means your manager is likely somebody else, not a designer, not a researcher, maybe not even in UX at all. They might be product managers. Maybe it's an engineering manager if you're very unlucky and you can report to an engineering manager, or you're reporting to like the CPO or something like that. And so they don't understand your work and the things you need to do. We have a completely different mental model of what things should be done. And so I'm curious, I want to start off there. When you're the first researcher designer team, how do you think about communicating the things that need to be done? Obviously, they hired you for a reason, but they might not understand exactly what you need to do, how you need to do, and why that's important. So how do you go about figuring that out?
That's a really good point. And also in terms of how people perceive your job, I think We have different weapons there. So for designers, you still have your craft, which is a sharper knife than ours. So it's like, well, you still, I mean, I'm going to go super extreme here, but even if you're, some people might kill me for this, but like, even if you just become a pixel pusher, you're still like pushing pixels, right? It's like you have something to show for. I mean, don't do that. I mean, you're much more than that. Don't get me wrong. But what I mean is like research is really easy to disregard the research and say, we don't need research. We don't have time for research. We know this. Like we are just like less protected. We don't have that extra weapon there. So I mean, it's also good to make the differentiation. But I think they both roles share the challenge that okay, we need to create this whole Marvel universe around us. And well, overall, in terms of what you asked me, I think there's you can easily make the case for it, right? It's like okay, when you eat like that's food that someone cooked, great, but that food did it grow in the backyard? No, someone probably went to the store or to the supermarket, and then there was a farmer there, who sold it to the store, and then like they grew it somewhere. So in order for us to have food on our plates every day, we start with the whole chain, right? We go back to like people in the farms or whatever. And this follows a similar logic, right? If we want to have repeatable, scalable research, we can go really to the end, which is like we want to make better decisions based on data. Or insights. If we want to get the insights, we need to do the research. In order to do the research, we need someone to do the research and we need people to research, right? So we need participants. In order for us to do that, we need to set something up because it's not just like we go out on the streets and we find folks to talk to. Maybe a startup that works, but if you're in a company with deadlines and planning and so on, that will not fly. If you start going from like, if you want better decisions, if you want to de-risk your decisions, you need to start like going back. So we need to build even a minimum viable version of this, and we can prioritize whatever you like. Maybe we just we bet big on building a participant database so we can reach out to folks like faster, but we don't need the repository now. You can then play like choose your own adventure there. You should tell the whole journey, so from farm to the tail, but like in UX, or like from decisions going back to like having people there to interview, to talk to survey or whatever, right?
All right, UX fam, it's time for another mid-show sponsor break. This week's episode is brought to you by my good buddy Florian Butler and the good folks at UXL. Next week, Thursday the 19th, Florian's partnering with UXL to run a hands-on Framer workshop where you'll go from blank canvas to a live, publishable portfolio page built in Framer in just 60 minutes. Here's what you'll learn: how to structure a strong portfolio page directly in Framer, core Framer fundamentals like layout, hierarchy, and components, how to create reusable components for speed and consistency, how to use Framer's workshop to build custom animated elements with zero coding required. By the end, you won't just understand Framer better, but you'll have a live, expandable portfolio foundation that you can keep building on. That's Thursday, March 19th from 12:30 to 2 p.m. Eastern. Grab your spot at beyonduxdesign.com/Framer workshop. That's beyonduxdesign.com/Framer workshop. And use the code OpenDoors26 at checkout for 25% off. And now, back to the show. I'm asking you for advice, but the thing is, you just mentioned we're all a bunch of just, blobs of skin running around trying to do our work. And we're not monoliths. The way that, one CPO expects to work for somebody else might be very different. And in the way one engineering manager or the person you report to, it doesn't matter. Even if they're the same title, they might be completely different. And so it's sort of a loaded question, really. And ultimately, the answer is going back to what you said before, which is, use your research skills to research the people you work with and interview them and talk to them and figure them out, because we're all humans and we're all different. And who knows? And the advice you give might work well for one person and fail completely for another. But ultimately, we're humans and we need to figure out how to work with these humans, and it's messy. And, I've said this all the time, but you can't build great software without great relationships. And I think designers, UX researchers, perfectly poised to go and get those insights to build those really strong relationships. I'm curious, when you start to see the ball moving and things start to work, right? What are some signs that the work you're doing is actually resonating with people above you? How do you know if you're actually on the right track or not? Are there signals or KPIs or OKRs or something that you're looking for generally that tell you, hey, I'm moving in the right direction?
there are many ways that we can see this, right? So one thing is like you have more requests coming your way. That's the most obvious one. So people are like, oh, we have a researcher and this is research. Okay, let's have more of that. Then something else is that research starts to appear in a conversation, and you will hear, well, should we like gather some user feedback? I mean, maybe it's not named research, but like, can we get some user feedback on this? Can we validate? Even if I don't like the word validate, I mean, I'm not super strict with vocabulary. I mean, I judge like facts and actions rather than like if they call it validate. What they just want research, whatever. I just don't care if they call it whatever, right? But you start seeing these things pop up, and you see like there's different like slight change of rhythm of like, yeah. So how can we like validate direction? How can we kind of like check if we are going the right way? You can see that in different conversations and people quoting your research or quoting your work, or something you said maybe spark other thoughts. And you said, I don't know, you research a product, and then you got these insights, and those insights made this PM think differently about something. And then, it starts informally, right? The first one is you get more requests. That's the formal one. But then it starts this informal vibe of like, yeah, there's an appetite for research. People see the value in talking to customers. And it happens usually after your third, fourth project that you deliver, especially if you're good at understanding what people or how people wanted to receive that message. I think that's how it's when it starts to happen. And I want to make this, I want to like kind of like highlight this with a marker. I think understanding how to deliver your message or your work is kind of like what makes or break your success here. Is like, this is the difference between like your third project already getting traction versus your 10th project sitting in the drawer gathering dust. I think there's a lot there to uncover, and I mean, I love this part, and but it goes back to the point, like, understand who's working with you and how do they expect to consume, how do they like consuming information, what do they expect out of your work, and kind of setting expectations like before you do the work, and then knowing how to deliver it. Those are the key things that you need to get right. But in the end, it's just like, that's how you start attraction, right? And you notice that because it's also very hard to describe, but like you see that there's like the feeling is like there's appetite for your work and for the type of work you're doing.
Yeah. I love that, man. Yeah, that's a really great call out. And I love this idea of just like thinking about how people interact with you and keeping track of these things. But I'm curious, like what I want to get at next is, do you have like metrics that you track as far as like being the only designer on a team? Are there specific metrics other than just like, people reach out to me or whatever, but are there things that someone like a framework perhaps you could use someone could use as a basis that maybe they haven't really thought about it? Do you have any something like that where somebody could sort of, check the boxes and say like, we're doing this, we're not doing this?
Yeah, there's one thing to consider like right up front. It's like when you are the first researcher, like everything that looks like a framework, you kind of it kind of doesn't fly. Like, I mean, it's really hard to put something like that together, because things are like, incandescent. They're like changing, and it's like they're moving, and there are like so many things. But I could give you some tips or some like signs or things you can like informally track. Like you can see how many people. I mean, going really. I'm not a fan of this, but this works sometimes in some context. If you see how many people are quoting your document or putting your let's imagine your document being, I don't know, a slide deck or whatever, like quoting it in other reports. If they mention your research in other reports, you can then have check-ins with your close stakeholders and, hey, what happened with this one? Did you decide anything related to this insights? Like having those check-ins, that's one way of assessing if your work is, being used. Then how many people, and then also understanding how, like, if there's a way. I mean, and especially it's hard because you're also like a bit like time bounded, especially if you're the first researcher, especially in this market and in this changing environment we're in. It's like you don't have 3 years to prove your impact as a researcher. But sometimes when you research something, it gets designed, and then it gets developed, and then it gets launched, and then in the end, it's like 8 months between your research and maybe you research something, nobody picks it up. Ends up in the backlog 6 months later, then it gets designed, and it's like 1 year and a half, and then your insights are now have flesh and bones, right? So it's like it has an impact. So sometimes it's hard. So that's why I'm going with this really like kind of sloppy metric, which is like, hey, how are you? Do you get feedback from your stakeholders? Do you see your research quoted? Do you see people interacting with your stuff? Do you get more requests? These kind of things. Once once you do that, and once that foundation is set, you can then like play around. It's like, well, okay, this my insights led to this, and then not only your insights, but my insights together with the work of the whole team help drive retention up to 35%. Before it was 15, something like that. So this change based on my work led to this one. But it's a long path there. So, it's like it's not so straightforward.
Yeah. I even wonder I don't know if the first few months, I would even worry about metrics and stuff. Keep your head above water, figure out the business, learn all the people, get used to the personalities and all that stuff before you start thinking about metrics to track. Because it's funny you mentioned, about for everybody's looking for a framework. Everybody's always looking for the easy, the framework, the things of the template. Show me the things someone else has done that I could just apply to myself. But most of the time, those things generally don't work anyway. And so I love your answer, which is sort of every other design thing. It kind of depends. I don't know. It depends on your team. Depends on what you're doing. It depends on the people that you work with. It depends on what they care about, because some of them might not give a shit about one thing versus another. Which sort of leads me to the next question. Ultimately, we all want to keep our jobs, and we need to make sure that our bosses are happy. So, I hate to say we optimize for the year-end review, but that's a lot of people are doing that because they don't want to, you don't want to get fired. So I'm curious, when it comes to working with, generally, as we said, solo designer, probably not a designer or researcher as a manager. So you're working and dealing with somebody else who doesn't understand your job necessarily. How do you manage up? How do you get that person above you to get his boss or her boss or their boss to care about the things that you care about, those people up above in the chain of command? Thinking about managing up, what are some tactics that you like to use to make sure that you and your boss, who might not be aligned with your mental model, stay aligned?
That's a really good question.
I'm full of them, dude. I got so many.
I know, that's why I'm here. So that's a different challenge, is so when you have someone who's not fully, I don't want to use the word knowledgeable, but maybe I can borrow it for this answer. Like someone who's comes from a different background, has maybe manages different roles. We have maybe a VP of product who manages design, product, and research is there. So maybe they are not super fond of research, but not necessarily super fond, but they are not super into research. They don't know the nitty gritty, I think. But it's also connected to what I said before. It's understanding what should you communicate to them and what matters to them. And I pled guilty. I mean, it took me years to have this mindset shift, but at some point I share what got me excited as a researcher. And I noticed that the things that got me excited as a researcher only excited other researchers. And probably happens the same in design. It's like, whoa, look at this, whatever thing that I put together. It's great. And someone else comes okay, cool. It's this. So my point here is you should you should understand or be mindful of what kind of information matters to people above you. What do they care about? And how can you connect your work to that? So if let's say, imagine 2 levels up, the CPO, she's worried about retention, and then this cascades to your head of UX. So retention is a big issue. And then at some point, I'm helping with my work as a designer or as a researcher. I'm helping tackle, this will help us with retention because of this, and that. You don't need to say I need to do surveys because of whatever. It's yeah, great. That's the how, and we can get into the how. But just being mindful of how you connect your work to that. At some point, I think we lose sight of the business, and I think it's not just we could probably do another episode just on this bit, which is sometimes as in people in UX, we focus too much on the user, and we kind of we carry the flag of we bring the user into the equation, the user's voice and whatever. But at some point, it's I would think of the great Joe Natoli when I think about it. It's okay, we have two things, and we need to create a bridge there. So how can we build a sustainable business around something that the user values, right? So when you think about it that way, you start thinking of the business, and when you think of the business, you also start thinking how different levels of your organization care or see stuff. And that's how I recommend managing up. Like if you have a manager who's maybe not a specialist in your area or not a specialist in your craft, okay, what matters to them? It's like you need to be you probably need to have a different level of seniority to have this conversation. That we agree. Like probably a junior researcher would benefit from having someone who's like, well, I think the layout here, the law of proximity and whatever. I mean, that they could benefit from that. Same as a researcher. If you have a manager who's like, well, I think you had like double barrel questions here, or you're by whatever, they can benefit from that. But when you have another role, it's like, okay, how do you connect your work to the bigger picture? And that's how we recommend managing that. Because in the end, the higher you go, the more big picture thinking you will face, right? It's like, and you don't have time to go about like the whole research or craft story, right? Like there's this thing in German that is like the higher you go, the thinner the air is. Like there's less air. So it's just like use it wisely. So if you need to manage up, it's like what do you need to communicate to these stakeholders that they care about and that connects to your work?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's funny too. I do a lot of career coaching, and a lot of times people they talk about having problems with their boss or not knowing this or not understanding that. And you'd be surprised how often when I ask the question, like, did you just ask them? Did you ask for input? Did you ask? And they're like, well, no, I didn't want to because they're busy. Like so many people are just like, they have one-on-ones with their boss and still avoid asking them a question to get insight, but instead they'll just guess and, freak out or worry about a thing when there was nothing there to worry about, or go down a rabbit hole when that was not what their boss wanted to begin with because they were just scared to ask the question and look like they didn't know what they were talking about, didn't know what they're doing or whatever. I can tell you as someone who, leads a design team that I would rather someone ask me early, and instead of waiting of weeks or months or whatever and coming and having to be wrong, So like to me, that's just like, it starts so simple. And again, as designers, as researchers, like that's kind of what we do. We interview people, we talk to people, we understand our users, and we want to solve their problems. But when it comes to our work, so few of us actually apply those same principles to the people around us. And I think that's just such an important thing to think about. So the last thing I want to talk about, Julian, before we get out of here, is the idea of, you do the work, you got to, but your job usually as the solo or founding designer is not to be the solo founder forever. You got to scale up. You got to get your team producing and functioning on their own, build those systems like we talked about earlier. And so how does that solo designer know when it's time to start scaling up? Maybe it's, I got budget and I know I'm going to hire a person or whatever, but if it's not that, what else is there? Is there some other way that we can think about that?
Usually the telltale sign there is like if you have an amount of work piling up that calls for 1.5 persons. So like apart from you can start creating the case for opening a position, right? But in order to get there, you need to build your way up there. Again, using the build one, but it's like you need to get the traction and you need to do all the things before that right. You need to nail all the other stuff. Like you need to nail how you communicate and people understanding what you do and seeing the value and requesting more and seeing why do we need to invest here. And then when you start connecting all the dots, like, well, we want more of this. And then people start requesting more and that will lead you to like, yeah, we need more people here. So I think it's to your question, it's like that's how you would assess. Like, yeah, we had too much work for me, and it's like either I clone myself or I work 80 hours a week, or we just drop all these projects and these projects don't get any love, they don't get any support. And in the case of a designer, it's like these designs or these products will be released later. In the case of a researcher, well, we're designing. So we are deciding like with no research or input, just like close our eyes and like shot in the dark. That's how you can do it. But for me, the important part here is like in order to get there, you need to nail the previous stages, right? And we can do a little recap here to understanding who you work with, what's interesting for them, what do they care about, setting expectations right away. Not only on a project level, it's like, what do you expect me to get for you in this project? What do you expect the outcome of this project to be? How do you plan on using it? But also like in the long run, it's like, where are we taking this whole thing? It's like, where are we taking this product, this vertical, this whole company, whatever? It's like, it starts, maybe I'm going too broad with this, but I want to get there. It's like, you need to start connecting in different levels. I want to highlight that again, because I think you said something really quickly. He said like we won't make good products alone. This is just like teamwork and opening up and being honest and building all those things is what will get you there, right? And I also saw the same. Like some people are like, "Well, I'm scared to ask this. I think I'm supposed to know this, or I don't want to show myself like someone who doesn't know." There are a lot of like ego situations there, but at some point, like we need to kind of ideally, right? If like there are companies with different working vibes or working environments, but ideas like we're in the same team trying to achieve the same goal. So we wanna win this championship, right? So okay, so what do we like? If I'm screwing up here, just tell me. If you want me to shoot this way, just like tell me or ask me. It's like, how do you want me to shoot? Like, do I take the 3-pointers? Do you go into the pick and roll? This kind of things, right? And it's good to be upfront because that's the best way to work together, right?
I love that. All right, man. So we've had you for a really long time now. We've both got jobs and we got to get back to it at some point. Before we get out of here, man, anything else that we didn't cover that you think is just incredibly critical for those people who are thinking about taking a role as a solo researcher designer or somebody who has just started and is kind of flailing around, not sure what to do? Closing advice, parting advice, anything else we didn't talk about that you think is critical for them to know?
Okay, if you're thinking of being the first UXer, could be a designer, researcher, even content designer, or even UX writer, because I think it applies to all the roles. If you're the first one, you should be aware that there's part of your time that will be dedicated to the actual craft, but then there's a lot that is going to be around everything else, everything around, but, in the case of research, it's like you will spend a long time or a lot of your time doing everything around the research and then just a little bit of time with the research. And it's good to have this, like, get this right from the start, because if you do it the other way around, I'm not saying you won't be successful or that you won't succeed on your role, but your chances are it's gonna get harder. Yeah, let's put it that way. Yeah, no, yeah, that's the thing. If you just think that if you're the only one in the first one, that you can just like put your head down and do the work, and that's what because you're passionate about it and so on. Probably you could benefit from a different environment, because if you are the first one or the solo, you're gonna be pulled in different directions. Second, you're gonna talk to a lot of people who don't get what you do. Then you won't have the tools or the infrastructure to support your work and to make your work scalable and faster and efficient. You need to do all these things, the people work, the infrastructure work, and then the actual craft work. So these are the 3 layers that you will work with. And usually the other 2 are larger at some point and will take a larger amount of your time than the craft itself. It is what it is. It's a beautiful challenge. It's an amazing challenge if you have that type of personality and you have this kind of also entrepreneurial gene in you. It's like, well, I need to get stuff done. I need to be resourceful. I don't have budget. I don't have time. I don't have people. It's like, you need to create the magic. If you have that, this role is going to be like a wonderful adventure, hopefully.
I love that, dude. So we didn't talk about the idea of being an entrepreneur. I know like there's another concept people may or may not have heard of, intrapreneur, which is sort of taking an external entrepreneurial mindset to your internal in-house, role inside of a large company or something like that. But that's a really good point. Having that entrepreneurial mindset, being scrappy, being able to do more with less, figuring out how to do stuff. And when, we talk about democratization in general, we didn't talk about it really today, but, when you're the only one doing it, you could do it all yourself and demand, I'm the researcher, I'm going to do it. Or you can enable your team and figure out how to do democratization safely, do it correctly. Like, as you mentioned earlier, like you're in control and kind of leading and helping the team to get there, as opposed to, democratization done poorly where everybody just goes and, finds crap. So anyway, that idea of like, being scrappy, that we probably could have talked like a whole hour just about that alone. Cause I think that's something like beyond just a solo designer, solo researcher, like you could have a team of 20 people and still need that mindset, still be incredibly valuable. So anyway, all right, we'll have to have you back on again at some point, Julian. We'll talk about that. But before we get out of here, I've got a few questions I like to ask all of my guests to help our listeners get to know our guests a little bit better. First thing that comes to your mind, you don't have to think too hard about it. You got some time to stick around and answer some silly little questions.
All right, shoot.
All right, first up, what is your favorite non-design book?
Oh, non-design book. Yeah, that's a tricky one. I'm a history nerd.
Okay.
So maybe I can't really point one. but I have kind of like periods of time where that I'm really passionate about. So like anything around the 1500s and the 1600s is a period of time I'm super interested in and super into.
What part of the world though? 1500s in China, very different from 1500s in Western Europe or something. So
that's a cool thing. But like mostly like Western history.
Okay.
Also because I'm also into Asian history. I mean, lately I've been reading a lot about Chinese history and so on. I've been to China last year. I was mind blown, by the way. Great holidays. In terms of Western history, I like this overseas expeditions, the first explorers from Portugal, Spain, that went around the world and all this kind of thing. All this period of history is like really, really interesting because we're more technologically advanced, like kind of like the Middle Ages, but also we're not quite there. So people will have like issues and they will die really young and they will have like a lot of challenges but they were still getting amazing things done, like going around the world with a boat. I would not even say a ship. It's like a wooden thingy. It's like mind blowing. So yeah,
and
I would say that
a lot of times. Yeah, it's just crazy. Yeah, well, we could talk about this in a second with the podcast, but you mentioned China and the history of China. I've been listening to a podcast called The History of China, which I got into because I was listening to the history of Rome and then the history of Byzantium and then the history of England and then like all this stuff. And I was like, I don't know anything about like Eastern Asian. So I started listening to the history of China. It's fascinating, especially like how far back the culture goes too, man. Like thousands of years, it's insane. I'm just like, my mind can't even fathom that, like, and especially being in America, like 300 years is old for me. So, going back like Europe, it's like a couple thousand years, but then like China, it's like 3,000 to 4,000. It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, amazing place. Yeah,
it is. I have never been, but I'd love to go someplace. What is your favorite non-design podcast? Is it a history podcast?
Yes.
Okay.
It's like funny enough, it's a podcast that I listen when I do like long drives. It's in Spanish, mostly about the history of Spain, but also like the Hispanic world, so also like South Americans and all that. And he has this really deep voice. He's a historian. Has this really deep voice and everything is really well documented. And every episode is like an hour and a half. So you can imagine like I just like, a long drive. It's like that's 3 episodes, like or 4 episodes. Like, great, fantastic. Like my wife sometimes gets sleep. Like, yeah, he's like, because she's also really into history, but sometimes like, this voice is too much. Like he has like this slow pace and voice. That's called, in English, it would be like stories with a drum. In Spanish, it's like historias de un tambor. Really, really cool. And I also have some other, but I'm really like I switch between podcasts because what you just said is like, the history of China, great. 2 months, I'm really into the history of China. Then I want to go to China. It's like history of the other day. I was listening to Uzbekistan, and I was like, wow, there are a lot of cool stuff there. With the Silk Route and Samarkand and Marco Polo and all this stuff. And I was like, I could go about an hour. Like I could talk for hours about this thing. So
it's funny too because when you listen to those, like it's not like interview episodes. Like there's like Beyond UX, for instance, like you don't have to listen straight through. You can hop around, listen to some, not listen to others. But with those, like a lot of the history, but you have to listen to them in order. And there's 2 things happen. One, you like listen for like months. There's a couple of these that have like hundreds of episodes, dude. Like History of Rome, for instance, History of Byzantium was like crazy. It was like they were doing it for like 5-6 years, just And then you get to the end, you're like, now what do I do? I don't know what to do. I'm all gone. Or because it's so much work, they only do a few and then you get into it and they stop making the podcast and it was like 5 years ago and they're never going to make another one.
Yeah.
And you're like, damn it, now what? I want to learn about this thing.
Yeah, they stopped at the monarchy and it's like, well, what about the republic? It's like, well, now that's for another author, which is like, we couldn't make it.
Yeah, it's too much work. I don't know. I couldn't imagine like a lot of these people that do these history podcasts are historians, but there's a few people that do them that are just like amateur historians, I guess, that just kind of make their own, go do their own research and stuff. And it just seems like so much work. Like I have a hard enough time doing this show with a full-time job. And that just requires me like writing a few interview questions. Like I can't imagine doing all that other stuff. Anyway, all right. Next up, what is your favorite meal?
Oh.
And this could be something you've cooked or something like a genre of food. It could be like something like specific, a dish.
Well, my favorite food, but it's also like something that you can cook in different ways is risotto, which is basically, rice with stuff. You can have different, you can have it with cheese, you can have it with tomato, with pesto, you can have it with fish, you can have it like in many ways. So basically that's a type of dish, but in reality it's like broth, rice cooked like slowly and then like add some cheese and some stuff. It's typically from northern Italy, but I see in like eaten everywhere in Italy nowadays. My family, I mean, my dad is from northern Italy. I'm half Italian, so I also lived as a kid there. So like my grandma would cook this and polenta, which is another dish from that region, and especially they're very wintry dishes, right? They're just like this like thick like broth and rice and cheese and like this stuff that will fill you and like make you feel warm inside. That's my jam. That's
Yeah, I love that, dude. That's awesome. What part of Italy is your dad from?
Friuli, which is the northeast.
Oh,
So
okay,
it's
nice.
next. So it's like between Venice and Slovenia
Oh, wow.
in the
Okay.
map.
Oh, wow.
So my family is from all that from all the area. It's like the one like someone like some of them are closer to Venice, some others are close to like Slovenia, but it's like it's just that area. But I'm actually Argentinian, so it's like the other half is Argentinian, and I'm from there. But I don't like. There's part of me, especially in the food part, is very Italian. So I don't like steak or all these things Argentina is famous for.
Oh, really? You don't like steak?
No,
Well, that's all right.
I love it. I love it. It's like really good, actually. Yeah, but I mean, I grew up there as a kid, and like there's some stuff that connects to you, like your childhood, kind of like these kind of things. Like I don't know. There's something there. I can't really explain it.
So you're in Europe now, though, right? Where do you live in Europe? Are you in?
I live in Spain.
You live in Spain.
Barcelona.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Okay, that's cool. So, well, very, very different from Italy, but close enough. You're closer than I am. That's for sure. I love that, dude. I haven't really gotten a chance to like go travel around Europe and stuff too much, and I'd love to do it at some point. But this leads me to my next question: what is your favorite vacation spot?
Oh, I'm gonna go back to the first bit. Everything is related at some point, right? I get excited about something I read or something I listen to in terms of history, and then I got like super hyped, and then I want to go there. That happens a lot. It was like before, like I was into Chinese history. It's like, oh, how about we go to China? Now it's opening. Like they changed the visa rules for European citizens and whatever. Like last year, it's like, well, might be a good opportunity to go. And I was like, yeah, let's go. And I was like super psyched. You know, it's like I would say that was one of the best trips I've ever done. Like China was great, but also because I don't know how much content I consume. You know, it's like I knew, oh, Xi'an, you know, the first capital of the unified kingdom and all this and all that. I was like super into that. Yeah, I don't have probably a favorite spot. I mean, I love Italy. Like that's like probably like Italy and Spain are two places I really love. I mean, I'm here because I love the Barcelona. It's a really beautiful city, but Italy is also like stunning. Like I don't know, Florence is great. Rome is one of probably I would say, yeah. Let's go with that. Let me rephrase. If you want to like favorite city in the world, I would say Rome.
Rome. Okay. Yeah, man, I love that, dude. That's awesome, man. Did your wife go with you? Your family went with you to China, I assume?
Yeah.
And are you the whole time you're talking about like history? She's probably like, boring.
It's
Like-
enough. Yeah, it's like okay.
My wife was the same way. She could not care less.
She's also into history, but at some point it's like, all right, that's
Yeah, settle down.
she was very
Settle
polite.
down.
It's like
I love that, dude. All right, last question. What is your favorite design tool that is not Figma? As a researcher, you might not be into Figma all that much, but this might be an easy question.
yeah, that's probably I don't know what to answer here. If you want, I could say Miro, but do you count that as a design tool? Is that a design tool?
I would say Miro is a design tool. Sure, you can do a lot of cool stuff in Miro.
Okay, then Miro. Let's go with that one. I actually like FigJam, but I shouldn't say it's like it's forbidding this question. So I'm gonna say Miro. Yeah, let's go with that.
I love it. All right, dude. Yeah, I like Miro. I don't get to use it too much anymore. We use FigJam at work, but I'm kind of a Miro fan myself. I dig Miro, but I don't get to use it much anymore. But anyway,
It's pretty cool.
all right. Julian, this has been amazing, man. I've had a ton of fun hanging out, talking to you. This has been a long time in the making. I can't even remember when we did our interview prep call. I think it was like 6 months ago or something like that.
Yeah,
We did-
something like that.
like a lot.
Stuff happens. And,
but we're
yeah.
back. We're back. And we finally did it. I'm so excited to have you on. Before we get out of here, man, give yourself a plug. Let everybody know where they can find you and your show and your courses and all that stuff. Last time we talked, you were writing a book. Are you still writing the book?
Yeah, but it's taking like I think I'll write a history book before I finish my research book. There are high chances that happens.
It's not easy. I know that.
Yeah, it's like writing is not. I mean, it's gonna sound funny because I'm gonna say, yeah, you can find me on Substack. You can find Finders to Builders on Substack. You can also find it on Spotify. You can find it on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. But even though you will find me on Substack, most of the stuff is like the podcast stuff. So it's like I write sometimes, but I really have a hard time writing. I'm more of I can talk for hours, as you probably noticed, but like writing is like something I struggle a bit more with. That's why the book is like taking longer. But yeah, that's still in the making. Probably I don't know when it will be done. Probably like research won't be a thing by the time it's it's finished.
AI will be doing it all for us.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. All right, well, check out Julian on Substack and online. Check out the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com for links to find Julian and all that stuff. And make sure you follow him on LinkedIn, sharing a lot of awesome insights and stuff like that as well. Julian, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben, for having me. Like, love to be here.
Well, all right, y'all. That's it for Julian and me for today. What's your take on being the only designer, the solo designer or researcher on a team? Have you done it before? What was your experience like? I'd love to hear your take. Send me a message on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I'd love to hear from you. And if the show's been helpful, the best way to support it is simple. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a quick review. It helps me more than you could possibly imagine. And if you want to go a step further and help keep the show independent and ad-free, check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. You'll get early access to episodes and the full video archive for as little as $5 a month. Everything else, episodes, newsletter, show notes, that all lives at beyonduxdesign.com. And if you're tired of staring at a blank Figma canvas, Mobbin gives you access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI screens and user flows with a library that grows bigger every week. Kickstart your creativity, streamline your workflow, and level up your design process. Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and never run out of inspiration again. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all.
I'm Argentinian, so we love soccer. You're catching up with soccer now. Like everybody's like, I have friends who are like,
there.
I'm watching the MLS.
Check it out, dude. I got like my FC Cincinnati stuff behind me here. You know, we got
Nice.
a MLS Major League team in Cincinnati. So we're
Nice.
catching up. We're not
Cool. You're
like
catching up.
the rest of the world is there, but we're catching up.
Yeah, you're catching up. At some point, you will call it football like the rest of us.